Later, we lay curled together under a blanket, listening to the rain slow to a gentle patter. Her arm was draped over my waist, her breath warm and even on my neck. I felt spent, sated, and utterly reborn. The careful, controlled life I had built was gone, and in its place was something wild, unpredictable, and more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was irrevocably in love with her. Waking up in her loft the next morning was a revelation. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and the smell of coffee and something burning wafted up from the kitchen below. I pulled on one of her flannel shirts, the fabric smelling overwhelmingly of her, sawdust, soap, and that unique scent that was just Lindsay, and padded downstairs. She was at the stove, attempting to flip a pancake that looked more like a charcoal briquette. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said, her back to me. "I made pancakes." Terrible ones. But with excellent intentions, I came up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist, resting my chin on her shoulder, watching the disaster unfold in the pan. "They're perfect," she laughed, a warm, rich sound that I felt vibrate through her body into mine. Liar. But I appreciate the sentiment. We ate at the small, scarred table in her kitchen. The burned pancakes and perfectly brewed coffee, a strangely perfect combination. In the clear light of day, the intimacy of the night before should have felt daunting, but it didn't. It felt right. And in that safety, I found myself telling her things I had never told another living soul. I spoke of the deep, abiding loneliness that had been my constant companion for years. A hollow space that not even my beloved books could fill. I confessed how I used them as a shield, a way to avoid the messy, complicated, and often painful business of human connection. I admitted my deepest fear, that outside of my academic knowledge, my world of facts and dates and analysis, I was boring, uninteresting, not worth the effort of knowing, and certainly not worth staying for. "You think you're boring?" she asked, her voice laced with such genuine disbelief that I had to look up from my plate. "Bella, you know more about 19th century literature than anyone I've ever met. You see poetry in furniture catalogs. You can look at a 200-year-old desk and conjure the ghost of the woman who wrote at it. You make Victorian ghost stories sound like the most fascinating thing on earth. That's not just knowledge, that's passion. Real, deep, lifeblood passion." She reached across the small table and took my hand, her grip firm, her skin warm against mine. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I looked down at our joined hands, hers tanned and calloused from a life of physical creation, mine pale and ink-stained from a life of preservation. They were so different, and yet they fit together perfectly, like two pieces of a complex joinery. "What about you?" I asked, my voice small. "Your relationships before?" Her expression grew thoughtful, a shadow passing behind her eyes. She didn't let go of my hand. "I've dated." Men, women, nothing ever stuck. I was always the one to leave. I'd find a reason, any reason, to run before things got too real, before I could get hurt. It was easier to be the one walking away than the one left behind. She said it plainly, without self-pity, as a simple statement of fact. My chest tightened. "And now?" "Now I'm scared as hell," she admitted, her gaze unwavering, locking with mine. "Because for the first time, I don't want to run. The thought of walking away from this, from you, it feels impossible." Her honesty was a gift, and it demanded my own. "It's new for me, too," I whispered. "Wanting someone to stay, being terrified that they will, and being even more terrified that they won't. That afternoon, I called in sick to the library for the first time in years without a shred of guilt. We spent the day in her workshop, and I watched her work on a Victorian writing desk, her hand sure and steady as she applied a fresh coat of varnish. In the quiet companionship, she told me more about her past. The string of failed relationships, the pattern of self-sabotage, the deep-seated fear of being truly known and then abandoned. She was laying her vulnerabilities at my feet, and the trust inherent in that act was humbling. She was showing me her broken pieces, trusting me not to cut myself on them. "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. She looked up from her work, her eyes serious, a smudge of varnish on her cheek. "Because I don't want to hurt you," she said, "and because you deserve to know that commitment terrifies me. But you make me want to try anyway. You make me want to stay and fight the fear." I crossed the room, the sawdust soft under my bare feet, and I kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of linseed oil and vulnerability, and a hope so bright it was almost painful. That evening, we attempted to cook dinner together in her small kitchen. She was, as she had warned, a terrible cook, burning the garlic and oversalting the pasta with a generous hand. I eventually took over, laughing, and she wrapped her arms around me from behind, pressing soft, distracting kisses to the nape of my neck as I stirred the sauce. "You're distracting me," I complained, leaning back into her solid, warm embrace, not wanting her to stop. "Good," she murmured against my skin, her breath a warm caress. After dinner, she led me upstairs to her bedroom. It was a sparse room, but warm, filled with a few beautifully restored pieces, a simple oak bed frame, a chest of drawers, and stacks of books that rivaled my own. Moonlight streamed through a large skylight, painting silver stripes across the rumpled sheets. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her hands resting on my shoulders, her thumbs stroking my collarbones, her eyes searching mine in the monochrome light. In answer, I kissed her. This time, there was no storm to hide us, no external drama. It was just us, in the quiet of the night, exploring each other with a patient, deepening familiarity. She undressed me slowly, her hands and mouth worshipful, as if I were the most precious, fragile antique she had ever encountered. I learned her body with the same focused attention I gave to a complex text, memorizing the sounds she made, the way she arched against me, the feel of her skin under my palms, the rhythm of her breathing as it quickened. It was a night of whispered confessions and gasping revelations, a cartography of desire and trust being mapped onto each other's skin. And when we finally fell asleep, tangled together in the moonlit dark, I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my soul that I was irrevocably, completely, and terrifyingly in love with her. The following months were the happiest and most tumultuous of my life. The happiness was a bright, steady flame that Lindsay had lit inside me. We built a life together in and around her workshop. I started spending most of my free time there, a stack of my own books gradually accumulating on a shelf she cleared for me. We fell into a rhythm. I would read aloud to her while she worked, passages from Gothic novels or historical accounts. She would explain the different types of wood grain, the history of furniture styles. We were merging our worlds, and it felt natural, inevitable. But the outside world began to press in. My colleague, Marcus, a man whose life was as orderly and predictable as the Dewey Decimal System, began to notice my distraction. He noticed the new lightness in my step, the dreamy look in my eyes during staff meetings, the fact that I was no longer the last to leave the library. He cornered me in the rare books section one afternoon, his voice a low, suspicious murmur. "You've been different lately, Bella," he said, his eyes narrowed behind his glasses. "Missing meetings, leaving early. And yesterday, I saw you get into a truck with that woman, the one with the tools." The way he said woman was laced with a judgment that made my skin prickle. The Clayton Library was a conservative institution, steeped in tradition, and the weight of its unspoken rules felt suddenly heavy on my shoulders. My professional reputation, built over a decade of impeccable quiet service, felt fragile. At the same time, Lindsay was facing pressure from her business partner, Robert, a pragmatic, nervous man who handled the financial side of their antique restoration business. He viewed my growing presence in her life and work with deep skepticism. I overheard their conversation one evening when he stopped by the workshop unexpectedly. His voice was sharp, cutting through the usual peace of the space. "You're letting personal feelings cloud your judgment, Lindsay. This intuition of hers, it's not a business model. It's a fantasy. I saw the strain it put on her, the tension between her fierce loyalty to what we were building and the pressures of her established professional life. We navigated these tensions as best we could, a united front in private, but the fear began to create hairline fractures in my confidence. I found myself pulling back in public, afraid of the consequences of being fully seen with her. One afternoon, we were in a coffee shop 2 towns over, a place where we felt anonymous. I reached for her hand across the table, a simple, instinctive gesture. She flinched and pulled her hand back as if my touch had burned her, her eyes darting around the room, checking for watching eyes. "We can't, Bella." "Not here," she said, her voice low and tight. A hot flush of frustration, sharp and sudden, bubbled up in me. "Where then?" I asked, the words coming out harsher than I intended. "Where is it safe for us to just be? To hold hands like any other couple?" She looked down at her coffee, her shoulders slumping in a way that made my heart ache. "I don't know," she whispered. That was the core of it, the unspoken truth that had been hovering between us. Our love, so real and vibrant in the sanctuary of her workshop, felt like a thing that had to exist in the margins, in the stolen hours between our public lives. The fear of discovery, of judgment, of professional ruin was a constant, unwelcome companion, a chill that even Lindsay's warmth couldn't always dispel. The breaking point, when it came, was from a direction I never could have predicted. It started with a strange and terrifying new ability. Lindsay was authenticating a Chippendale desk for a demanding client. The moment my fingertips absent-mindedly brushed the old leather writing surface, a vision slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. I was no longer in the workshop. I was in a dim colonial-era room, watching a woman in a long dress, her shoulders shaking with sobs as she wrote a desperate letter to her lover, a woman named Margaret. The images were not like memories. They were vivid, visceral, accompanied by a wave of heartbreak and fear so acute it stole my breath. I gasped and stumbled back from the desk, my heart hammering against my ribs, the real world swimming back into focus with a nauseating lurch. Lindsay was at my side in an instant, her hands on my arms, steadying me. "Bella? What's wrong?" "You're white as a sheet." I described what I had seen, the words tumbling out in a frantic, disbelieving rush. The woman's face, the texture of the paper, the smell of tallow candles in the room. To my astonishment, she didn't look at me as if I were crazy. Instead, her eyes lit with a fierce, Excited curiosity, the same look she got when she discovered a rare wood inlay. She immediately brought me other pieces to touch. A Victorian jewelry box revealed a socialite's secret, passionate affair with her chauffeur. An antique rocking chair showed me generations of mothers singing lullabies to their children, a cascade of love and worry and hope. My touch was a key, unlocking the emotional memories stored within the objects. I was utterly terrified. I felt like I was losing my mind, that the line between my imagination and reality had permanently blurred. The visions were unpredictable, overwhelming, leaving me emotionally drained and physically shaken. I started wearing gloves constantly, afraid of the next unwanted episode, jumping at casual touches. The world had become a minefield of latent histories. Lindsay, however, saw it not as a curse, but as the ultimate extension of my gift. While I was drowning in fear, she was throwing me a lifeline of purpose. What if instead of fighting it, we learned to use it? She proposed one evening, her voice filled with a thrilling excitement. Bella, this is incredible. This could revolutionize authentication. You could know a piece's history, its true story, just by touching it. We could offer something no one else can. Her practical, unwavering belief in me, in this terrifying new part of me, became my anchor. Slowly, tentatively, with her patient coaching, I began to lean into the ability. She taught me breathing techniques to ground myself, to control the flood of images and emotions rather than be controlled by them. I learned to focus my touch, to ask silent questions of the object. It was still frightening, but it was no longer a chaotic freefall. It became a skill, a strange and powerful sense. This new, profound partnership brought us closer than ever, a bond forged in shared secret and mutual dependence. But it also intensified the external pressures. Robert's skepticism turned to outright hostility when Lindsay proposed using my intuition for high-stakes authentications. The final catalyst was the library's annual fundraising gala. It was a black tie affair, the Great Hall filled with Houston's cultural elite and wealthy donors. I was demonstrating an ornate donated music box to Mrs. Henderson, the board chairwoman. As I pointed out the delicate carvings, my hand brushed against the polished rosewood. Instantly, a vision overwhelmed me. I was in a 1950s parlor, watching a young woman receive the music box as a wedding gift from her fiancé. But instead of joy, I felt her crushing despair. She was marrying a man while deeply in love with a woman who worked as her family's seamstress. The music box played their secret song, the one they hummed while dancing alone in hidden moments. The pain of her trapped life, the fear, the longing, was so intense it was suffocating. I gasped audibly, stumbling backward, my hand flying to my chest as tears streamed down my face, hot and fast. The ballroom around me became a blur of concerned and shocked faces. Mrs. Henderson's voice seemed to come from underwater. "Miss Griffin, are you all right?" Whispers rippled through the crowd. I saw Marcus's face, his expression a mixture of concern and grim validation. I managed to mutter an apology about needing air before pushing through the crowd toward the exit, my face burning with a mixture of vicarious heartbreak and profound humiliation. The next morning, I was called into Mrs. Henderson's office. Her usually warm demeanor had cooled into a mask of professional disappointment. "Bella, we need to discuss last night's incident. Several board members expressed deep concern about your behavior. Your emotional outburst was quite dramatic and, frankly, unprofessional." She steepled her fingers. "We value your contributions, but the library's reputation must come first. Perhaps you should consider taking some time off to address whatever personal issues are affecting your work." The suggestion hit me like a slap. 8 years of dedicated service, and I was being gently, politely pushed aside because of one moment of vulnerability, because I didn't fit their image of a serene, unflappable archivist. I was a problem to be managed. In that moment, standing in her elegant office, I saw the two paths of my life with stark clarity. One was the safe, muted, predictable path I had always known, a path of solitude and suppression, where I hid my true self and my love to maintain a respectable facade. The other path was terrifying, uncertain, and real. It was lit by the warm glow of Lindsay's workshop, filled with the scent of wood and the sound of her laugh, a path where I could love openly and use my strange gift without apology. The choice was suddenly, blindingly clear. I didn't go home. I went straight to Lindsay's workshop. I found her packing a box of her personal items, her face drawn and tired. "Robert and I are parting ways," she said quietly, before I could speak. "He gave me an ultimatum. He said it was him or this. You. He said your psychic nonsense was a liability. I couldn't work with someone who doesn't believe in us. In you." Her words, her sacrifice, solidified my resolve. "I quit the library," I told her. She looked up, shocked, her hands stilling on the cardboard flaps. "I chose fear once, and it almost cost me you. I won't do it again." The words were a vow, clean and sure. "I don't care about the job or what people think or any of it. I just want to be with you. I want to do this with you. For real. No more hiding." She crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled me into her arms, holding me so tightly I could feel the frantic beat of her heart against my own. The relief was so profound it felt like a physical unknotting of my entire being. We were choosing each other, and in that choice, we were choosing ourselves. We launched our own business together, Griffin and Vance Historical Authentication. It was a leap of faith that felt more like flying than falling. We combined her masterful restoration skills with my unique, honed psychometric ability. We rented a larger space, a bright, airy warehouse that became both our workshop and our home. My visions, once a source of terror, became our most valuable, secret tool. We were discreet, of course, presenting my findings as the result of intense historical research and a keen eye for detail. But between us, we knew the truth. We worked with museums, auction houses, and private collectors, our reputation for uncanny accuracy growing with each successful, impossible authentication. Leaving the library's hallowed halls was not a loss. It was a liberation. Our shared workshop became our kingdom, filled with the music of saws and the quiet rustle of pages. We learned to navigate the challenges together, the skeptical clients, the financial uncertainties, the emotional toll a particularly intense vision could take on me. Lindsay was my constant anchor, her hand on my shoulder a steadying force when the past threatened to pull me under, her voice a tether back to the present. 6 months after we officially moved into the loft above our new workshop, we hosted an open house for potential clients. The space was filled with the buzz of conversation, the glow of pride on Lindsay's face as she explained the complex restoration of a Georgian bookcase. I was speaking with a curator from the Museum of Fine Arts, my confidence feeling earned and real. I caught Lindsay's eye across the room, and she smiled. A slow, deep, private smile that was just for me. A smile that held all our shared history and our hard-won happiness. We had built this, together, with our own hands and hearts. On the anniversary of that first thunderous night together, she led me up the stairs to the rooftop of our building. She had strung fairy lights that twinkled like captured stars, and set a small table with a simple white cloth overlooking the glittering, endless Houston skyline. The air was warm, the sky a deep, velvety blue. "There's something I want to ask you," she said, her voice uncharacteristically nervous. She took both my hands in hers, her calloused thumbs stroking my knuckles. Then she let go and got down on one knee, pulling a small, black velvet box from her pocket. My heart stopped. The world narrowed to her face, to the love and fear and hope shining in her blue eyes. "Bella Griffin, you crashed into my life like a thunderstorm and brought color to my gray world. You taught me that love is worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth building a whole new life around." She opened the box. Nestled inside was a simple, elegant diamond solitaire on a platinum band. It was perfect. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down my face, not tears of sadness or fear, but happy, freeing tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I didn't have to think. The answer had been written in every moment we had shared since that cold December night. "Yes," I whispered, my voice cracking with emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." As she slipped the ring onto my finger, a perfect fit, I looked at our joined hands, the restorer's hand, scarred and strong, and the librarian's hand, once ink-stained and hesitant, now partners in every sense of the word. The journey had been messy, terrifying, and more beautiful than any story I had ever read. It had begun with a broken door and a rescue in the dead of night, and it had led here, to this rooftop, to this promise of a future written not in dusty books, but in the living, breathing, glorious reality of our shared love. I was no longer just a reader of stories. I was the author of my own, and I was writing it with her.